Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those over here in Europe. Good evening to everyone who may be turning to and welcome to the session. Over the next hour, I'll give you a taste of what makes Quebec one of the places in the world in which to craft games. I'm Kucharsky. I'm with Invest Quebec, and I'm focused on working with international studios and companies that work in our province in Quebec. Today, I'm joined by a couple of my partners in crime, Bouchard from Quebec International, Philippe Valentine from Montreal International. Together, we hope to give you a good picture of Quebec, our respective cities, and what makes them compelling. And to help us do this, we've called on. All right. So I hear there's a bit of activity, so I hope you guys can hear me. Yeah, I'd like to call on Ben and Chris. Let me the mic over to Chris, who is going to tell you a little bit about Quebec, about our gaming industry, and how la guilde works. Everyone.
Yes, thank you. So I think just for everyone to know, Ben is having some issues, and we will be fixing. Not Ben, sorry, but we will be fixing these issues, and we will be getting back to his presentation soon. Obviously. My name is Chris. For those who don't know me, I'm a homegrown developer from Quebec. So I've gone through a bachelor's degree in cinematography from the University of Montreal, and then video game studies, and then I did a postgrad in game design right here. And so I've gone through the system of schooling here in Quebec, so I'll be able to talk upon that a little bit later. I founded a company called Manivoid Entertainment in 2014. I'm the CEO of Manivoid Entertainment, which is a game development company that works on PC and consoles, and we have over 20 people now in our studio. I am the co-founder of an accelerator in Montreal called the Indie Asylum for the Creatively Insane, which basically gives funding and human resources and mentorship for young up-and-comers, startups in video games so that they don't go through the same hassles that I went through when I started 7 years ago. I also teach in 2 universities, programming, game design, and digital marketing. And I'm the vice president of La Guilde du Jeu Vidéo du Québec, which is our cluster here in Quebec that basically encompasses most of the video game studios in the province. I think we can move to the next slide. Basically, just to give everyone a glimpse on how we created our ecosystem here in Quebec, I think it's important to know where it comes from. And that's why I put the slide. This beautiful man in 1996, Bernard Landry, decided to create a very, very interesting tax credit for the multimedia industry here locally. And this credit basically gives you back 37.5% of any salaries paid at the end of the year to anyone doing production in video games. And so this tax credit back in 96 attracted huge studios like Ubisoft and EA and Eidos. And through the years, a lot of studios came into Quebec to develop games because of the fiscal advantages that the province could offer. And all of these studios needed more workforce. So organically, the universities and the colleges started giving better and bigger programs, more specialized programs in certain types of programming or certain types of software for people that have the knowledge to be able to enter the industry and for the industry to keep growing. And so more and more people were learning how to make amazing games from all of the biggest companies in the world, learning the best practices for making these games. And then what happened is the barrier fell to be able to sell them. And suddenly, with access to free engines like Unity and Unreal, and access to free distribution through Steam and other platforms of the sort, it was now possible for game developers to reach the consumer directly. And because of this, well, a lot of developers from the AAA industry decided to spin off their own companies and become what we call independent studios. And so this began like the growth for the independent scene in Montreal and in Quebec. And basically, this is how like our ecosystem came to have a second wave of growth. And I think at this point we could go to the next slide. So the second wave of growth showcased a bunch of other stuff, and the fact that the barriers to entries fell. Well, we also saw that it was the same for everyone around the world. It wasn't just in Quebec that it was easier to sell games. It was everywhere. And so we can see from the graph here on the left that a lot more games are being sold today than ever before. And so as independent developers, we suddenly realized that we had to look ourselves in the mirror and see what we were doing well and what we were not doing well. And one of the biggest issues that we had was funding for startups. You know, understanding the business side of things and starting a company is not easy. Understanding how to get your first influx of cash was not easy as well. And then also understanding how to do marketing and how to get eyes on a project were the biggest issues that game developers were facing. And one of the big reasons for this is that the multimedia tax credit that we have is amazing for production, but all of the business aspects and all of the marketing aspects are not covered by the tax credit. And so all of the bigger studios always kept that in the US, in the UK, and in France and elsewhere. And so we never really had a workforce that was talented here and or had learned how to, from the bigger studios, how to do these things locally. And we can go to the next slide. And basically, this is why we founded a cluster that we called La Guilde, because we're among the best at making games, but we needed to get better at selling them. And so La Guilde began as a recruitment of independent studio. And these studios basically, there was about 50 of us in 2015 when we founded the cooperative. And you can go to the next slide. And basically the cooperative offers a bunch of different services to the local scene. One of these services, basically every studio needs help with accounting or legal or QA or localization. And so basically it was a way for us to give bulk pricing on these services, negotiating not just for a small studio of 3 or 5 people, but negotiating for 3,000 indie developers was a lot easier. And also we had a place at the table when we wanted to represent, video games as a whole. So government representation fell under La Guilde's purview. We created events such as this, the MEGAMIGS, so that we could, connect with people from here and all over the world to get better at doing what we do. And basically general studio support. So anytime a studio might have a question, they could come to La Guilde and we could give them an answer. And the most important thing of all was the business intelligence aspect. So as I mentioned earlier, we needed to get better at selling games and at running companies. And, as a studio of 3 to 5 people, it's very difficult to know everything about our industry. But altogether, we've seen a lot of things. So if I was perhaps signing a deal with a publisher, well, if I wanted to make sure it was a good deal, I would go see other developers that would have gone through that. Then we could have helped each other out. And they would have told me, oh, be careful of this, be careful of that. And basically, we just started making better decisions as a whole, as an industry. So this is what La Guilde does. La Guilde is basically there to help funnel the growth in Quebec and make sure that we're going in the right direction. And basically, this growth, if we go to the next slide, this growth has been staggering. Since the inception of the multimedia tax credit, we've had huge growth. But since we founded La Guilde, we've had another second wave of growth. So in the 2015, this is a graph from 2017 showing that in between 2015 and 2017, we had about 50% growth. This is all of the indie studios that we suddenly popped up on the map because they were not on the radar before. And back then it was 10,000 jobs. Today, I'm very proud to say that, we're 300 studios in the province with over 15,000 jobs. And we're in a unique position in the world because we have some of the best talent here you can find. We have some of the best schools with specialist programs you can find. We have government support that helps us to keep growing. And in my opinion, unlike other industries like, car manufacturing or construction or whatever it is, we're constantly, getting better and we're still growing. And we have an opportunity here to really take the top spot in the world as the biggest and best place to make video games. And that's very unique. There's not many industries where Quebec can say they are the best in the world or can be. And I anticipate that in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more growth. And hopefully we can take our place as the world leader and help, other people from around the world take emulate what we've done here and be able to grow their ecosystems as well. And so that was my piece on La Guilde and just to put the table for our ecosystem. And I'll pass it over to Sabrina for the rest.
Harry, do you want to try to say a few words, or do I go on?
Go ahead, Sabrina. I think that lag and what was my kids getting home from school and simultaneously all getting on a device.
We hear you well now, though.
Apologies for that. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Okay, good to hear. Well, I'll come back at the end then and say a few things.
Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone, I'm Sabrina Bouchard. Erica, you can change the slide. I'm representing Quebec International. It's the economic development agency for the Greater Quebec City region. And just like Invest Quebec and Montreal International, my team is dedicated to attracting foreign investment and doing the retention of these investments in our region. But the agency has also teams that are doing attraction of international talent. They have teams helping companies doing their commercialization, innovation, fostering entrepreneurship. And we also have the clusters of the Greater Quebec City region in-house. So Quebec Epics is the cluster in the techno-creative sector, and they are collaborating with the La Guilde as presented. You can change the slide. So our ecosystem here in Quebec City is a nice mix of global leaders, mid-sized companies, and a lot of indies as well. There's something that you should remember is that there's a strong collaboration culture here. There's about 87 companies in the value chain. 80% of them are IP oriented. And the 20% that's left in the servicing is of very high value. An example of that is Prima, who recently announced that they would be collaborating with Forza on their next game. Some of the companies that are here, like Ubisoft, Beanox, Activision, and Prima, has been here between 15 and 20 years in the first wave. And there's some international studios that have added in the recent years, such as Gearbox Software from Texas and Lariat Studios from Belgium, for instance. You can change the slide. There's a specialized workforce, and one of the examples that we have of the collaboration locally is, among others, Beanox and Ubisoft working with local technical colleges and the university to make sure that the training is adapting and evolving to the needs of the industry. They're also working on new initiatives with other companies, with alternative coding schools locally. And that's also true with the animation, VFX, television production, and post-production. There's some initiatives that are complementary to what's already available in the education system, and that's an example of how companies are collaborating closely together. You can change the slide. So Ben told you about the fact that the indies were booming, and it's also true here in Quebec City. We have an accelerator called Le Camp that we are operating. So we've seen the soft landing of international studios in the recent years, but also the acceleration of a lot of local studios. We think that besides what Chris told you about, there's a faster emergence of indies locally because they're accompanied and their entrepreneurship skills are developed. There's some initiatives like Catapult and Acceleration Program to make sure that new innovative projects are supported. There's the creation, only in Quebec City, there's a creation of about 7 new companies per year, and most of them are coming out of major studios. So it's really an opportunity for you to grow and scale here. You can change this slide. Eric didn't get the chance to talk to you about the provincial incentives that are in place. We'll have another session tomorrow that will go more in depth about the incentives that are available in the province. But on top of that, there are some powerful municipal incentives that are available and complementary to the provincial incentives. That is because for the city, this sector is a priority. I've chosen 4 of the programs that are available, but there's about 15 of them. So, for instance, the foreign investment support and the Saint-Roch area leasehold improvement program are programs, are grants up to $500K, so that companies who want to expand or localize themselves in the IT district can get support from the city to do leasehold improvements. Some of the studios benefited for instance, mocap studios or sounding rooms in the city. There's a soft landing voucher for international companies to do their soft landing here. So the city pays half of the expert fees for them to establish themselves locally. There's also a technology showcase where international, well, any company at all can do a showcase or a pilot at the international level. So, for instance, we have a local company called Mixa Vision. They're right now doing a showcase in Korea with the support of the city. So you can change the slide. So here's an example of a cross-sector collaboration. Gearbox Software, locally in Quebec City, has developed a mini game helping to solve DNA sequences that can be used for them for research with research centers that they're collaborating with to do a map of the human gut microbiota. So within a few months, about 20 million puzzles were solved by gamers, and that represented a leap of about 200 years in data collection. So that's a good example of a collaboration within the province and outside in R&D that has contributed to scientific advancement. You can change the slide. I've talked to you about a little bit about the fact that the indies were very successful in the region. One of the examples is Sabotage. They just had this year the most successful Canadian campaign of all time on Kickstarters. They raised 9 times more than their objective, and they were approached by Japanese composer Yasunori Mitsuda to collaborate for the sound on their and the music on their games. So it's a huge success. We have lots of indies self-publishing right now, and in 2018, 5 out of the 10 games that were published by Nintendo Switch were done in Quebec City. You can change this slide. So there really is an opportunity for you to have your key center for global talent attraction in the province of Quebec. There's many reasons for that. First of all, the clusters in Montreal and Quebec City are attracting talent because of the quality of the IPs that are developed. The big ones, for instance, in Quebec City, there's Borderlands, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Original Sins, and I'm not even talking about the great indies. Those are attracting people from the US, France, the rest of Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Israel, to name a few. We have teams in Montreal International and Quebec International doing recruitment missions. So we're going to get international workers, students, and entrepreneurs around the globe. And those initiatives are not only taken by the big studios, but also by the indies. One of the reasons for that is the fact that we have the global talent stream at the Canadian level, which allows to fast track work permits in the IT sector. And so that allows not only to get access to a local talent pool, but the whole world. There's some recruitment tools like the tax holiday for foreign experts at the personal level that are great tools to get the best talent in the world. And we have in the province a great, outstanding quality of life, great access to housing, great access to nature. It's 20 minutes away from my house. We have it's a best place for families, for millennials. So it's really an opportunity for you to get the best talent in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Just wanted to come in for a couple of minutes before I turn the floor over to my fellow panel members. I think one of the things that really comes out in what Sabrina said and what we're going to see during the rest of the session is just how integrated and sort of interconnected the gaming system is in Quebec today, coming from the story of large major studios evolving into the indie scene. But then you find this entire ecosystem of tech providers, of service providers, of tools developers, and so on, coming in and adding to the mix. With different schools, with research institutions, and it all happens in a wider and broader context of a tech industry which is founded on strengths in AI and machine learning, aerospace, bringing in immersive tech and engineering know-how, and all these different things. And what we've seen over the years, and my colleagues and my counterparts on the session today, we've all sort of seen the evolution of the industry, how it come from a story of centers, become more regional as well. We're seeing studios and little hubs pop up throughout Quebec as well. We've got Montreal and Quebec City on the panel today. The reality is that things happening in Chilliwack, Saguenay, Sherbrooke, and even the major studios are looking to cities as well. So, having said that, we're going to move up the river from Quebec City. We're going to make our way to Montreal, and I'm going to turn the floor over to my former colleague, Philippe Valentine, and I can tell you a bit more about what's happening in Montreal.
So hello everyone. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to share the floor with Eric today. So glad to see you. It's been a while since you moved to London. So I'm very happy to introduce or to discuss in a bit more details about the Montreal ecosystem in the video game development. As most of you surely know, Montreal is one of the main hubs in the world when it comes to game development. But as Eric just mentioned, there's something very interesting as well about the ecosystem in Montreal. It's the depth of not only the game development part, but also the tools providers. We mentioned already Epic Games and Unity, which are active in the regions as well. Autodesk is in Montreal. So, there's a lot going on in terms of tool development, but also all the service providers you may need. We have some of the largest facilities in the world for localizations and quality assurance. So there's a lot going on in Montreal, and I just want to discuss that a little bit with you. So moving on maybe to the presentation. Montreal obviously benefits from the very generous tax credits that we discussed a bit earlier, so I won't get back into that. Just so you know, there are about 230 studios in Montreal. It's a bit difficult to keep count these days because we add quite a few every year. But there are more than 200 studios in the region. About 50 of them are major studios, but we have a lot of indie studios now. And I'll be very happy to discuss in the next slide, about the how this ecosystem has evolved from a foreign direct investment perspective. But I wanted to discuss a bit before we go into that, what makes Montreal unique in terms of an ecosystem. I would put a lot of emphasis on the talent pool. We always say that talent is key in the video game development industry, but I want to put some emphasis on specific aspects of what makes Montreal unique. I would say that the first element to mention is the creative spirit in the city. It's all over the place, not only in the gaming industry, but also in entertainment, in visual effects, in animation, in virtual reality. We're head to, well, they used to be very big, Cirque du Soleil, but we're also home to companies such as Rodeo FX, Moment Factory, and so on. So, coming into Montreal allows you to tap into this creativity pool, which is not only focusing on the game development part. That is explained probably by a few factors, such as, the fact that Montreal is a truly multicultural and multilingual city. So there are people from all over the world which blend together to create this new way of doing things. Also, this is explained by the fact that we have a lot of foreign workers which are dedicated to the gaming industry. About 40% roughly in Montreal of all game developers are actually foreigners. They're not Canadians by birth. So, having this input from people from all over the place makes this talent pool very unique. There's one specific area, and we had a very interesting slide about a map, showing all the studios in Montreal. And there's one concentration which is quite specific in one neighborhood called the Myland, which has the most artists per capita in North America. So, there's a huge concentration of artists in Montreal. Sabrina touched base a little bit on that as well. The fact that in the province of Quebec, in general, there's a really strong collaborative environment. People really gather together, as La Guilde showcases as the best example. People tend to come together to find solutions to common issues. And, it's not me against you. It's let's do something all together. So that's something quite unique that you will feel throughout the networking you'll do at the MIGS, and whenever you can visit Montreal, that you'll discover by yourself. So now moving on to the timeline that what happened in Montreal over the past few years. As we discussed, a few years ago, we had all these massive studios which opened, 100+ employees in the region, EA, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers, and so on. And then, of course, we had all this local ecosystem which came out of that, with producers deciding to start their own studios and all that. But the trend that we've seen when it comes to attracting foreign studios in Montreal over the past few years is very interesting. Because it's not about having those large players anymore investing in Montreal. Obviously, as you can see on the timeline that is showcased right now, a lot of them have actually reinvested in Montreal. So Keywords, Ubisoft have the largest Q&A and game development facilities in the world here in Montreal, with 4,000+ people for each of them. But what's really interesting is when you look at the years 2018, 19, 2020, you start seeing names which are maybe a bit less familiar to some of you, but which are obviously very known in their home countries. It's because these studios have chosen Montreal as the first or one of the first international expansions that they've done over the past few years. And this is where the trend is really interesting. Montreal has gained so much traction in the industry that a lot of companies are actually considering setting up their first international expansion here in the region. And this is where we come to play. So of course, we can discuss a little bit more about what attracts the companies themselves in Montreal. But I want to put some emphasis on what attracts the game developers to Montreal, because it's part of why Montreal is so great. I mentioned already, the fact that it's a really creative and cultural city, but if you come here, you'll feel that right away, especially in the summertime. There's a thriving cultural life, and it's a bilingual cultural life. So it's both French, English, and of course, all the languages which are spoken in Montreal around it, more or less 120 languages. Just so you know, Montreal is fairly bilingual, second largest city in Canada, second largest English-speaking city in Canada as well. Also the main French-speaking city in the country. 55% of us are bilingual, 20% of us speak 3 languages or more. So, there's this cultural boom all over the place. For game developers interested into coming to Montreal, there's a lot of career opportunities. Yes, obviously in the game development industry, but also in the VFX and animation industry, the virtual reality world. More or less, we have 22,000 people active in those creative digital industries. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to come here. Obviously, this goes without saying that Montreal boasts as well a very high quality of life, affordable cost of living, very safe environment. So it's actually a place where you can feel home very easily, and people tend to be very welcoming as well. If we can move a bit further down the line with the presentation, I wanted to touch base as well on the talent pool. As I just said, there are 15,000 people more or less in the province of Quebec active in the video game industry, more or less 13,000 in Montreal. But overall, when you factor in, as I said, in the animation, the visual effects, and the virtual reality industries all combined, which is quite flexible, in the sense that people can move from one industry to another, you have a talent pool of more than 20,000 people in Montreal alone. That is explained by two key factors. First, the fact that international mobility is quite easy. So getting a work permit, to come and work in Canada in the video game industry, is easy by comparison to many other countries. So as I said, about 40% plus in Montreal in the industry are from other countries. But also from the fact that just in Montreal, we have about 35 schools which can provide with diplomas in the video game industry, up to PhD, actually. We have a school, which is the NAD Center, which provides a lot of diplomas. You have on the next slide a sample of those schools. Not all of them are represented there, but certainly the main ones are all showcased. Of course, now you can see it. So the main one is the NAD Center, which goes up to PhD level. But we have a lot of technical schools as well active in the industry. Now, just in a nutshell, who Montreal International is, a bit like Quebec International and Invest Québec International. We are mandated to help, foreign talent coming to Montreal, so whether foreign students and skilled workers, and the branch for which I work myself, which is the Foreign Direct Investment Division. We help foreign companies setting up and expanding their operations in the Greater Montreal region, which is 82 municipalities. It's a 4.3 million people area. It's a large market. But just so you know, we have a lot of gaming studios which have set up in Montreal over the past few years. I've been working with quite a few of them over the past 5 years or so. And we can't wait to have you on board as well. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Philippe. Good to hear from you. Good to see you. And Montreal story. So we've spent the past half hour giving you guys a bit of our respective cities, our territories, what's special about Quebec, where it's come from. And now to hear direct from the horse's mouth the story is. We turn the floor over to our more in Quebec and in Montreal. And they're going to tell a little bit about how that came to be. So I'd like to introduce all of you to Ben Mattis, head of Road Montreal. I'll let Ben introduce himself a bit in a couple of seconds, but basically been in the industry for about 20 odd years. I based myself on your LinkedIn with a little detour out of the industry. And he's going to have the chance for the next little while to tell you a little bit about Montreal stuff.
Well, great to be here. I guess I'm the horse, and this is my mouth. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. So yeah, again, my name is Ben Mattis. I've been living and working professionally in the gaming industry here in Montreal since about 2000. So coming up on 20 years. I did have a little bit of a detour outside of video games. Spent 3 years working at some small technology startups in Montreal and Toronto, mostly with a focus on entertainment, gamification, AI, etc. So while I did sort of leave games, I was definitely games adjacent, let's just call it. The 20 years that I've spent in the industry has definitely given me certain perspective in terms of what makes Montreal unique as a development sort of supercenter. And I guess if my story today, had a theme, it would be, there's nowhere else in the world I would rather try and do what I'm currently trying to do. So the Montreal is a fantastic place for a variety of mandates as it relates to game development. And my mandate with Rovio is a particular sort of flavor of that, and I'll share a little bit more about that as I go through my talk. So Rovio, a really important thing to know about Rovio is it's a lot more than its biggest hit, right? A lot of people, when they think of Rovio, if they are even aware of the name, they think Angry Birds. Angry Birds is an international cultural phenomenon. It's one of, if not the most successful IPs in the world, entertainment IPs in the world that came out of the mobile space. It has something like 90% worldwide brand recognition. That doesn't mean 90% of the world has played it. It means 90% of the world, if you survey them and you show them that little red bird, you say, do you know what this is? They're going to say, yeah, I've seen that before. So it has absolutely reached that level of sort of, worldwide recognition. That said, Rovio has for many years now been very actively invested in expanding beyond that, all the eggs in that basket, as it were. And that includes creating of new IPs, exploring new platforms, new mandates, etc. Rovio has invested significantly in cloud streaming, in AR, in VR, in Internet of Things. They've done research in blockchain and distributed ledger. There's been a lot of investment across all of these different areas to sort of say, what's next? What's coming next? And to not rest on their laurels and just say, oh, well, let's just keep on making, Angry Birds games. And so they had this initiative inside the organization, which has a name. They called it the Future of Entertainment Initiative, sort of for lack of a better word. And in particular, what they refer to there is like, as the industry evolves, how is that going to impact Rovio? What's Rovio's place in this rapidly changing landscape of the world of games and entertainment? And so in me, they thought, oh, well, maybe here's a guy who has, a better than 50-50 shot at succeeding there. Is there a technical hiccup? Is everything good from the audio point of view? Yeah? Okay, cool. And the reason why they okay, sorry about that. I heard some technical support giving some feedback there, but I think everything's okay. One of the reasons why they thought to come to me was because I have a previous working relationship with a very senior executive inside the organization, a man named Alex Pelletier-Normand, who built his career in many ways here in Montreal and has since moved around and done time internationally in many other places, often for Gameloft, and ended up moving to Rovio a couple of years ago. So when they were thinking, well, who could possibly lead this initiative for us to look at kind of where gaming is going and how that's going to impact Rovio, he thought of me and we started that conversation. And I think one of the things that I represent beyond, liking making video games and that sort of stuff, is I think in some ways as a sort of career developer in Montreal, I'm not particularly special because I've made mobile games and they've shipped, and I've made console and PC games and they've shipped, and I've worked outside of games in other entertainment media and shipped product there. And I think that's nice to have in a leader who's trying to drive this mandate of sort of convergence of all of these different intersecting areas. But I represent a large demographic of people here in Montreal who have done the same thing, right? And so there's this confidence that, wow, we have a really particular mandate here, and yet we still have a large industry and a large talent pool to draw from. People who have shipped console and mobile and maybe VR and maybe AI product already in their portfolio of shipped products. And there's not a lot of cities in the world where you can say that. I mean, you can probably count them on one hand. So my mandate was to come in, build a studio that is exploring this, what we call future of entertainment. How are mobile games and console games and cross-platform and AI and games as social spaces and voice and all of these sort of trends that we see really kind of gathering steam inside the gaming industry, how are these going to converge to create these new experiences? And yet at the same time, Rovio also wants to make more Angry Birds games, right? Like it's not like we're ignoring this opportunity that we have with this franchise. So at the same time, there was an additional draw for us here in Montreal, which is, wow, when you look at the behaviors and the Freemas and the Ludias and the Illogicas and there is a wealth of independent, successful, well-established companies who've got console and free-to-play experience, who can absolutely bring that talent to bear when working with partners who have, brands that they want to, continue to deliver product and content with. And so there was this second benefit of the Montreal studio, which is physical proximity to, again, one of the largest talent pools in the world when it comes to developers who could possibly work with Rovio to make other products. And so that was like a cherry on the top of like, oh, well, maybe there's some more that we can do there as well. We had a conversation in my early days about, okay, so we think, Ben, you might be the right person to try and like drive this initiative forward. Should we even consider another city other than Montreal? And honestly, that conversation lasted like 5 seconds. Like we didn't even need to have it. No, we've got everything we need here. Any other questions? No? Okay, cool, good. That's sorted. And so there was this very, very strong confidence that because of the tax subsidies, because of the quality of life, because of the talent pool, because of the converging talent pool, it was a no-brainer, right? And it was a very easy conversation to have between myself and the leadership team. And I think one of the things that Philippe mentioned earlier that I do want to draw attention to is that when you think about the talent pool of Montreal and you think, oh, well, what was it, 15,000 game developers, absolutely don't ignore the 5,000 to 6,000 people outside of games, but who are in multimedia, hugely creative, and can bring those alternate points of view to the table that are going to help us push the medium forward, right? You need, I think, a lot of people hopefully will agree, you want that combination of established people who know how to make games, who know the process, who know the technologies, who know the pipelines, who know the players, etc. But also those people from Moment Factory, from Rodeo, from Mel's, from you name it. There's a long laundry list of people with exceptional creative vision who can come to the table and say, oh yeah, I get that that's how you've kind of always done things, but what about this way? Like this way's cool. Maybe we could try that. And that's absolutely something that we are embracing Rovio Montreal and has been met with success. We've not had a hard time finding people outside of games who we think could fit very well into this mandate and convincing them that this is an exciting career change for them. The confidence in Montreal, I think, is really important to assert that as it pertains to talent as well as the executives. So let's say you've made up your mind, you've decided you're going to open a studio here, and there are no shortage of people who've made that decision in the last 6 months, right? I've got written down here in the last 14 months, Turbulent, Don't Nod, Amber, New World Interactive, Virtuos, Cloud Chamber, NetEase, and Rovio. And those were just the ones that I had noted down, in my own documents in the last 12 months. So that's 8 significantly established developers opening studios here and have chosen to open studios here in the last 12 months. And so those executives and those teams have decided that, they like the tax subsidies and all of that sort of stuff. and they like the fact that, 15,000 strong talent pool, we've got a good shot at getting a slice of that pie. But I would also say that it seems to me like it's becoming increasingly easy to convince foreign workers to move to Montreal as well. And as someone who's done this for 20 years, I remember a time getting on the phone with developers in Vancouver or in California and trying to convince them to leave the sunny shores of California and saying, like, you're going to have to invest in a parka. And they're just, parka, snow, whatever. Like, there's no money in the world that could pay them to move out of California. Times are changing. We're not going to get into the politics. We're not going to get into the economics. Let's just say there's a decent subset of the world now who looks at Canada, looks at Montreal, looks at the ecosystem and says, yep, I'm ready for a switch. And so Rovio Montreal is 10 heads as of yesterday, I believe it is. And 30% of that headcount is coming to us from other places, whether it be the States or Toronto or outside of Montreal, because we found particular talent there that filled a particular need that we wanted and didn't necessarily have a hard time convincing them to relocate their lives, their families, their entire, world view to Montreal because of all these other benefits that we've previously talked about. So don't underestimate that. My last message is really one of sort of holding hands and hope and kumbaya and all of that sort of thing. Again, of those 8 developers that I just listed, there's quite a wide variety of mandates, right? There are people who are coming to the town looking for very particular talent. There's people who are coming to town looking for quantity. There's people who are coming to town looking for not only artists, but artists within a particular genre with a particular sort of, style or aesthetic or whatnot. And I would bet money that every single one of them is going to succeed. Every single one of them is going to achieve their mandate and more and beyond. And I'm not saying the sky is the limit and there's infinite capacity. That's not at all my message. But my message is that Montreal seems to have this very strong balance and this sort of equilibrium between its ability to grow talent pool and attract new heads. And I am not aware of, as of yet, in my 20 years in this studio, an example of someone who came here with a mandate and ended up closing because they couldn't find the resources to succeed. There's all sorts of other reasons why they might not have succeeded. But in as far as an ecosystem where you have all the necessary tools to succeed, Montreal fits that bill. And so, if it doesn't work, it's going to be almost certainly for other reasons. So come to Montreal, right? We're not the evil competition who's going to steal your resources. We're going to work together and we're going to grow the talent pool collectively such that more and more people can come here. And to Chris's point earlier on in this presentation, forget this top 5 garbage. I mean, if we're not number 1 and only number 1, then something's seriously wrong because we've got everything that it takes to reach that goal. That's it. No problem.
Wow, thank you, Ben. Listen, we're all working on that to be number 1. I could almost leave it there because I think everything that you put out there today is fantastic food for thought for all those that are listening in today. Really interesting and compelling testimonial. And I think one of the things in sort of the 800-pound gorilla in the room of this year's virtual event, and that which I'm sure you've been sort of faced with, is that the challenge, I would call the challenges, but I mean the particular circumstances in which you and Rovio have chosen to start up a studio, to onboard people, and to go through this this experience of building a virtual entity in a physical place. And really interesting. I'm sure there's a few people on the line that are facing the same struggles today.
I wish I could say that, I had it all planned out and I knew exactly what was going to come and that this is all going according to plan. And it's amazing. I remember in March and April, people looking at me going, really? You're going to open a studio in the middle of a global pandemic? And I said, yeah, should be okay. And in some ways it absolutely has been, because Montreal International has been a great partner. All of the support that we've had from inside of, the ecosystem Gameplay Space, La Guild, Rum, other studios reaching out, offering support. I've got friends at Alogica, I've got friends at Cloud Chamber. I mean, it's amazing how supportive the community has been of like, ooh, dude, you're trying to do something hard here. Like, let us know if we can help. At the same time, given that we are sort of in the earlier foundational phases of the studio, we have sort of leaned more towards the senior developers first and foremost to create the sort of structure, the culture, establish the processes and whatnot that will then grow upon as we move into 2021 and beyond. And they have, I would say, found it maybe a little bit easier to adopt to the work from home because they're generally a little bit more autonomous. They kind of take that initiative. They don't necessarily need someone telling them what to do as long as, we're all kind of, marching in the same direction. That said, I've literally had pen in hand to sign a lease 3 times in the last 9 months. And all 3 times I've just been like, oh, I'm not so sure. The most recent one was 3 days before Montreal went code red. I had a space. It was going to be a short-term 6-month lease, but still, it was going to give us a place to call home. And I just looked at that and I just said, God, like, am I going to sign this and then basically throw that money away because we'll never go? In hindsight, I don't necessarily regret not signing that lease, but the turmoil of like wondering whether or not now is the right time is certainly something that I have lived through myself and that I know my team shares, because we do want it to be real. We do want that space with our name on the wall. We do want that feeling, and we don't have that. This is my office. This is where I've been for the last 6 months, and them too. And that does absolutely create particular challenges when you're trying to bring a group together and bond over a shared goal and all of the storming and norming and the kinds of stuff you want to do in the early days of bringing a group together. That's been a little harder. But I've got a great team who is embracing the challenge, putting it on their shoulders and taking a lot on in order to make that happen with the support of Rovio. It's knock on wood, it's going.
Not quite there. It has been interesting times. I'll come back to Phil and to Sabrina. One of the things that, that we've seen, and Chris and Ben, please feel free to chime in as well. But, we've seen this evolution over the past few years in the types of studios that are coming to Quebec. Through the golden age of the big majors coming in, successful rounds of reinvestment. And we've seen this growing geographical diversity, content and platform diversity that's come to the fore. And again, I don't want to touch on sort of the more negative aspects, but as those projects, those videos have changed, everybody's faced with different challenges. I'm wondering, in sort of your recent experiences, if there are some things that have stood out to you that our guests online, would be interested to hear, and how others have been able to overcome those.
I can probably jump in because I'll speak for 2020 because it's a very special year, as we've all experienced so far. I'm personally very surprised by the number of studios which have actually opened an office in Montreal this year. Well, when I say an office, it's obviously having a legal entity and, of course, hiring some people, probably working remotely. But still, those studios have established a presence in the region. We have, I think, 5 so far this year, which is quite surprising considering there's a lockdown on the borders and all that. So some companies have actually decided to kickstart new operations. Rovio is one of them, but we've just announced yesterday Amber Studio from Romania. We've had earlier this year a few other companies from other countries. So we're starting to see that even through the COVID crisis, it's pretty much business as usual in the game development industry. And the trend that we had started to see a few years back, going back to that geographic diversity that you mentioned, Derek, this has not stopped. I'm working myself with a lot of studios from Ukraine, from Tunisia, from Eastern Europe in general, and they're still actively incorporating in the process of setting up their team. So even if that's done remotely, they usually go through either consultants or people that they know already in the region to build the core team. So instead of traveling themselves to sign all the paperwork, they basically ask someone else to do it. But it's pretty much business as usual, except for the rental market from so far.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. So as for Quebec City, I would say that the main challenge this year has been the same. It's been COVID for sure. So one thing that you should remember is that the whole cluster in Quebec City is in expansion mode right now. And everybody's been hiring. So there's a mix of local hire, but also international hire, as we talked about earlier, and because of the tools. So the challenge has been to hire people to work remotely, but the objective is to bring them in the ecosystem, and not only to have people around the world to work for you remotely. One of the reasons is the tax credit that makes it even way more interesting to have the talent work from Quebec. So I would say that the main challenge has been expanding in a pandemic.
If I may just add one very quick thing, we mentioned before the animation and VFX industries. The animation industry is doing very well, but the VFX industry has kind of been struggling with the delays in the production, in the Hollywood productions mostly. So there's kind of a part of the talent pool in Montreal right now, which is looking for something to do. Obviously, most of them are really busy, but there's kind of this fluidity right now within the talent pool, which is very circumstantial, but which is there, which is something that we've seen this year. A lot of people have changed industry or, have looked around to see if there are other opportunities for the next step in their careers.
Thanks, guys. We've got just a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to go to the chat because I see a question that's come in, so I wanted to address that before we get off. We've got Gomez, who has written, somebody advise someone who lives in Montreal, loves games, worked on the IT industry for 10 plus years as a project manager, Scrum Master, and wants to start to work in the games industry. How should I go about doing that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of unanswered job postings right now on LinkedIn going around, especially for project management and producing and all of that stuff. So if you have 10 plus years experience in that, I'll just go on LinkedIn and start looking at those job offers, because there's a lot of them that I see floating around. There are a lot of other websites you can go to, Indeed.ca or Espresso Jobs, or I know Rum was mentioned earlier. There's a lot of different options out there to kind of see what jobs exist. And twisting to video games when you come from a project management standpoint isn't that difficult, because I mean the processes are pretty similar to any kind of a tech project, or as long as the agile method, or like you mentioned, being a Scrum Master. I think in your question, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find a fit, because that's pretty much what everyone is using. And then it's just learning the software, be it Jira or Handsoft or whatever that company is using. So yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to knock on those doors with 10 plus years experience in that sphere.
Thanks, Chris. I think we're going to be cut off in a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to throw in a couple of last words. First off, I think Chris, what you just said really points to what we've all been talking about. There's that depth of the bench that's here. There's the industry in and of itself, the talent of people that have been in games and worked in games, and that we've been able to attract to Quebec over the years. But then it's that broader world and the cross functionality from other associated industries and other sectors that have made the game industry thrive. I see we've got a very quick question that just popped up. I hope we will be able to address it. If not, I just wanted to, I saw it and I lost it. Yeah, all right, so we have a minute left. A question for Chris, which is, did you notice changes in the dynamic of showdown between studios? I'm guessing that's in the context of this.
Yes. Well, I mean, yes, there's more co-development going on. As Ben mentioned earlier, a lot of studios are co-developing. Like a lot of the service companies that we have in Quebec are co-developing with IP studios. So I mean, there's a lot of that going around, and I've seen a lot of examples of studios collaborating together to create a new IP. I think everyone is starting to realize each other's strengths and weaknesses as companies. Maybe a studio is much more better in a certain style of art, and another one that has like 8 programmers that are on staff. So, I mean, depending on, those different strengths, people, just because of the ecosystem, through La Guilde, through the different initiatives we have in Quebec, people talk. And when people talk, things emerge. And that's how, innovation starts. It's kind of someone sparking an idea and then a bunch of people getting excited about it. And, there's a lot of that going around for sure. And I think, especially because just to add to what was said earlier, and I know that I don't have much time, I think Montreal has shown a lot of resiliency during COVID. I think our industry has shown a lot of resiliency during COVID. We are one of the unique industries in the world that has continued to grow despite a global pandemic. And so, not only co-development, but pure development of IP. More studios coming in, more jobs being offered, more people changing jobs to jump into our industry. As I mentioned earlier, there's no reason why we shouldn't be amongst, not only amongst the best in the world, but the best in the world for game development. And through everyone in this panel and a lot of the people watching, I hope that you have that spark now that you want to come to Montreal, and all of the options that are here for you, and everyone on this panel right here are the right people to call if ever that's something that you want to do.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Chris. And I would also add to that, Montreal and Quebec and elsewhere throughout the province.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure speaking with you this morning. Take care.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.